Hello everybody, let's talk about heat embossing today, the materials you need to do it, and some tips to get a perfect result. Embossing is a technique consisting in giving relief, and it can be done in two ways, cold embossing or heat embossing. Cold embossing is done with a die cutting machine and embossing folders, and we've got a video where we talk about it. Heat embossing is done using special inks and powders that melt with heat. So let's take a look at everything you need to do this type of embossing. Of course, an embossing ink like this one from Versamark. It is a transparent and slow drying ink, which allows the powders to stick where the ink has been applied. There are other inks that, although they are not specifically made for embossing, are slow drying and can be also used for this. We're talking about distress inks, for example. Another essential element is embossing powder. These powders are so special because they melt when you apply heat to them. Although some powders may look like glitter, they are not, and a normal glitter will not work for this technique. Another important element is an embossing heat gun to melt the powders. It has little air power but a high temperature. That's why a hairdryer won't be useful for this, because it's just the opposite. It has a lot of air power and less temperature. Powders would fly away and wouldn't melt. And finally, any stamps whose design you like. As extra elements, you can use this anti-static pouch to rub it over the surface when you are going to emboss to avoid the embossing powder sticking out of the stamped area. Another helpful tool is a glitter and embossing powder funnel to help you collect the embossing powder. Now, let's see how to make the heat embossing. First, run the anti-static pouch over the stamping area. Apply the ink to the stamp as you would usually do with any other ink and stamp it. Take the embossing powder and sprinkle it all over the surface. Make sure it's well covered and don't worry about wasting anything because the leftover will be collected and put back into the bottle. To do this, the funnel we showed you before is very useful. As you can see, the powder has stuck to where the ink was. If there are some little powders, you can remove them with a fine brush. Finally, take the heat gun to apply heat all over the surface. You will know that the embossing is ready because you will see how the powders slowly change its color and acquire a bit of shine. You can repeat the same process over different surfaces like vellum paper or black cardboard, to which you can apply gold powder and the design will look great. Embossing allows you to incorporate different techniques and apply them to your projects to obtain different results. Let's see some of our favorites. Once the embossing is done, you can leave it as it is or add some color with watercolors. The embossing will delimit the drawing, preventing the watercolor from coming out. You can also apply ink over the embossed design. The embossing does not absorb the ink and will highlight the printed image. Now you can wipe over it with a piece of paper to clean the embossing to remove any possible color transfer, and that's it. Embossing ink is also available in marker format. This way you don't have to limit yourself to just stamps, personalized embossing design. Write with the marker as you would do with any other marker and then follow the same steps with the embossing powder and the heat gun. You can also use this marker to highlight details on die cuts or cards, simply by painting those parts where you want to emboss them. The embossing technique is a lot of fun. It looks great and allows you to experiment and include different techniques. Let us know in the comments what you think about heat embossing, if you have any doubts or if you want to share any tips we didn't talk about. See you in the next video.